Chapter 8. Sonia woke up on Sunday with a smile. Thoughts of the night before still fresh on her mind as she laid in bed feeling high. She and Javier were connected at the lips all night. The two staying up until the sun came out, not wanting to part. Energized by her thoughts, Sonia climbed out of bed, everything around her seeming to glow in the soft spring sunlight. She moved around the familiar room that used to belong to her father, but had become her own during spring breaks and summer vacations. Everything just how she left it years ago. After quickly brushing her teeth and combing her hair, she jogged downstairs, but to her surprise, Javier wasn't in the living room. His blanket was neatly folded on the sofa, and the entire house was still and silent. She stepped onto the porch, but instead of finding him out there, deep in thought like she had the night before, Javier was nowhere in sight, and neither was his car. She went back inside confused, then headed upstairs to grab her phone. But as she ascended the steps, the sound of tires crunching over gravel floated in from outside. Returning to the porch, Sonia watched as Javier and Mildred climbed out of his car. Mildred smiled over at Sonia, then said with a laugh,
"Look who's finally up."
"Hey, Granny," she smiled as Javier grabbed groceries from the back seat.
"We went to pick up some stuff. Javier said he never had grits before."
Mildred smiled as she stepped past Sonia on the stairs. Sonia was to help Javier with the bags, but he stopped her saying,
"I got it,"
then gave her a quick kiss on his way to the door. While Sonia headed upstairs to shower, Javier sat in the kitchen listening to Mildred as she cooked. She moved swiftly, whipping cheese into the grits and pulling her biscuits from the oven. His stomach rumbled as the smell of sizzling sausage hit his nose. Then, finally, Mildred announced that breakfast was ready and he could wash his hands to eat. After Javier walked to the kitchen sink, Mildred joined him, pliers in hand, explaining the cold water knob was broken.
"Gary used to fix things around here. Now it's like the place is falling apart. Tried to get my son and Terrence to do some work, but he doesn't know much about houses,"
she said with a strained laugh. It was in the light of day that Javier really saw the kitchen, the peeling linoleum floors, and faded brown rings on the ceiling from some kind of leak. Sonia floated down the steps, following the smell of her grandmother's freshly baked biscuits and spicy-smelling sausage. But as she passed the mantel, a photo caught her attention. The frame was slightly askew, while the others were perfectly aligned. She picked up the picture and smiled immediately as she stared down at herself, sitting proudly on her father's shoulders. She still remembered the day clearly. Gloria had snapped the picture to capture her newly missing tooth, and it was just minutes before Sonia ran up the street to play with the twins, Shamika and Nadia. She came back in the house in tears, after the twins had been messing with Sonia as usual. Sonia had burst through the door, tears streaming down her face, and Gary rushed over, kneeling beside her. His strong hands gentle as he cupped her face, his eyes filled with concern.
"What is it, baby girl?"
He asked, his voice soft. Between sniffles, the words tumbled out. They were calling me Snaggletooth, and I don't have any friends, Daddy. Nobody. The nobody hung in the air, a small, lonely sound. Then a wide, warm smile spread across Gary's face, chasing away the worry. He scooped her up in a comforting hug, holding her close against his chest.
"You got me,"
he said, his voice a low rumble against her. He held her until the crying stopped, and the corners of her mouth twitched up into a grin. Sonia stared down at the photo, of the one person she just knew will always be there to ease the pains of the world and keep her safe. She was only pulled from her thoughts as her phone buzzed with a call from Nate. "Hey, is everything all right?" she asked, stepping out onto the porch. Inside the kitchen, Mildred frowned after hearing the front door close.
Javier, can you please go get Sunny before her food gets too cold?
He gave her a nod, then pushed away from the table, the chair legs scraping lightly against the linoleum. As Javier stepped outside, he immediately noticed Sonia's serious expression. After she wrapped up her phone call, he asked if everything was all right. That was the PI, Blue left Michigan. He said some detectives went out there to speak to Blue about the case, then he got shook and left town.
Where did he go?
She shrugged. The PI's not sure, but he said he'll track him down again. Javier slid his hands around her waist, hugging Sonia tight. She nuzzled her face against the crook of his neck as his body heat shielded her from the chilly breeze.
I was thinking we could come back out here sometime. Help your granny with the house. Get some stuff fixed.
Sonia pulled back a little, smiling up at Javier. "I'm sure my grandmother will really appreciate that. Thank you."
It's nothing.
He shrugged it off. Mildred appeared in the doorway.
Javier, I thought you were bringing Sonia in. Instead, you out here cuddled up on the porch. Come back inside. Breakfast is getting cold.
She laughed. The day flew by quickly, and before they knew it, they were on the porch again, hugging Mildred goodbye in the amber glow of the streetlights. Sonia and Javier walked down the steps, hands in hand, promising they'd be back to visit soon. In the car, Sonia's eyes glanced down to Javier's hands skirt hers. Their fingers laced together as they drove back to the city. All day, he found little ways to touch her. A hand on her knee, stroking her arm, holding her hand. If she was close, his hand was connected to her, and she loved it. Sonia smiled slightly, as a strange feeling bubbled up inside of her. It was a feeling she couldn't place. A giddy, wild kind of feeling that also felt a little scary. It felt like they flew to the Bronx, because before Sonia could blink, they were parked outside of her house. She stared over at Javier, all that excited energy bubbling up again.
I need to take care of some business tomorrow. But you should come over afterward. We can watch a movie or something.
Yeah, we can do that. She smiled, turned at the waist, and waited for him to stop staring straight ahead and kiss her goodnight. But instead of a kiss, he gave her a simple nod, then said,
I'll call you tomorrow, and I'll send a car over here to pick you up. It's probably not a good look for me to come by here so much.
Sonia was confused. "What you mean, not a good look?"
Word could get back to Rico.
He said, like it was obvious. Sonia felt like the air was punched out of her stomach, and all the warm, fuzzy feelings she'd had over the past 2 days disappeared. She shook her head, staring hard at Javier. "I thought you wanted to be with me."
I do want to be with you.
Sonia shook her head, looking away from him.
I didn't think I needed to tell you that we wouldn't be out in public.
"So you scared of Rico?"
I'm not scared of Rico.
He said very seriously and very calmly.
But I'm not about to let you get hurt because of me.
"You think Rico would try to hurt me if he found out?" Javier looked away from her, choosing his words carefully.
Look, all I'm saying is, you know how he can be sometimes. I just want to be careful.
Sonia let out a sigh and reached for the door, But before she could get out, Javier spoke again.
You want to see me tomorrow, right?
Looking into his beautiful eyes had Sonia nodding in agreement without a second thought. The following night, Javier opened the tall, solid oak front door, letting Sonia into the dark foyer. And instantly, his hand was grabbing hers.
Come up.
He said, leading her upstairs. Once they reached Javier's bedroom, he quickly moves her to the bed. Sonia stared up at him as he put off his shirt, her vision softening into an unfocused gaze as she watched him drag off her pants. She wadded her thighs as Javier kissed her along the stomach, making his way down between her legs. She let out a soft moan, moving her hands onto the back of his head, fingers caressing his hair as she squirmed in pleasure. Afterward, as they were sprawled out in Javier's massive bed, Sonia said in a low tone, "I thought you wanted me to come over for a movie." He smiled slightly.
We still got time to watch a movie.
Sonia was silent, and her serious expression was worrying Javier. He gripped her waist and pulled her closer to him.
You all right?
"Javier, I don't want to just hook up."
I don't want that either.
She shot him a sideways look. "You don't want to be seen in public with me, and you want me over here at night."
I told you I was busy earlier today, but me and you can spend some real time together for the rest of the week.
He ran his hand over her back.
You can stay here with me all spring break if you want, day and night.
He said with a slight smile that melted all her anger away. The rest of the week flew by, and with Sonia coming over with just the clothes on her back, she spent most of her time comfortably lounging in Javier's boxers and t-shirts, the days blurring together in a mixture of takeout and movies, with the pair being all wrapped up in one another, creating their own little world that shut out everything else. On their last night together, they lay in the silent darkness of Javier's bedroom, Sonia's legs wrapped tight around him as she stroked his cheek. Her eyes roamed across his face, lingering on those beautiful dark lashes that brushed against his cheekbones. But it was the scar that drew her in, a raw line running from his right cheek up to his hairline. She moved her hand over the slash, tracing it with her fingertips.
Why you always touching my scar?
He asked with a slight smile. She shrugged. "How'd you get it?"
Fighting some kids back in my old neighborhood in Brownsville.
"You're from Brownsville?" she asked in shock. "I thought your family was rich."
Louise and my two aunts are rich. My mother lost some money way before I was born.
"How'd she lose it?"
My father,
he said simply.
he ran through all her money, then ran out when she got pregnant with me.
"That's so messed up." Sonia thought out loud. Javier pulled her close against him, and Sonia nestled into his now familiar embrace. A warmth she had grown so used to over the past week, his strong hands and solid frame wrapped around her like a heavy, warm blanket. The thought of a night without his arms around her felt like a sudden, unwelcome chill. As soon as the driver pulled off from Javier's brownstone, Sonia already missed the warmth of his embrace. Spring break with him had been fun, but during Sonia's lonely ride back to the Bronx, the truth hit hard. No matter how strong her feelings were for him, he wasn't hers and she wasn't his. Everything between her and Javier was just one big secret, a part of her life she would have to keep hidden in the shadows. The next evening when Sonia arrived at work, Rita practically bounced over to her, bubbling with excitement as Sonia stepped in the door.
Sonia, some space freed up in the office. You'll finally get your own cubicle.
Sonia plastered a smile on her face as Rita proudly showed her to her new tiny workspace in the loud, chaotic office. A few minutes later, Sonia's mood lifted when she spotted Javier walking past her desk. Her face lit up with a smile, eyes meeting with his for a split second. But after he gave her a quick, almost dismissive nod, Sonia's smile quickly vanished. Her eyes burning into him as he moved swiftly through the office and out the front door. Later that evening, Sonia stood near the coffee machine, listening to Jasmine as she tried convincing her to move into a place off campus for a semester.
Rachel is moving in with Ish, and I'm not trying to stay on campus. Me and Nafisa just need one more roommate. Sonny, please. I don't want to end up living with one of Nafisa's stuck-up friends.
Sonia still looked unsure.
You said you wanted to live closer to campus.
Yeah, and I do want to move out of my mother's house. Sonia smiled slightly. But my money is already going to tuition.
You'll be full-time all summer again, right? Just save up your money. Besides, you should ask Rita for a raise. I know she will give it to you. Luis and Rita are always bumping up people's pay.
Jasmine commented. Then she added with a grin.
Plus, if you move out of your mother's place, you can invite your new boyfriend over whenever you want.
I don't have a new boyfriend. Sonia rolled her eyes.
What happened? You said you were staying with him for spring break. Did y'all have a fight or something?
Nope. We had a real good time. Sonia rolled her eyes. He wants to keep everything between us on the down low.
On the down low?
Jasmine made a face, like she was enraged for Sonia.
Why does he want to keep it a secret?
Because of my ex. He doesn't want word to get back to him.
The deporting one?
Sonia nodded. Then said simply, "It's complicated." As the night went on and the office began to empty out, Sonia sat alone, typing a one last email before heading home. As she typed, she heard the click of the front door unlocking, then looked over to see Javier stepping inside. She returned her eyes to the computer screen without saying a word, her fingers pecking away at the keyboard quickly as he pulled up a chair beside her.
Why you here so late?
Had a lot of work to do, she said flatly. He stared at Sonia as she continued to type and ignore him.
What's the attitude about?
I don't have an attitude, she said, looking at him out the corner of her eye. Javier moved his hand onto hers, stopping her typing.
Talk to me.
I understand that you said we can't let people know we're together, but you're not even speaking to me now.
You're not this mad because I didn't tell you hot.
He looked at her eyes. Sonia shook her head. All of this is just getting to me. I don't know what I was thinking agreeing to it. This is not what I want.
You don't want to be with me?
I'm not with you now. She said it like it was obvious. All me and you were doing is hooking up. I know you don't want to call it that, but that's what it is. I go over to your place for sex, and that's not going to be enough for me. Back at my grandmother's house, I was so happy. I thought we were about to start something real.
Sonny, this ain't just sex for me.
He said, offended. Sonia lowered her eyes down to his hand, still holding hers.
I want you, and I want to be with you.
But not in public. Javier grabs her chin, forcing her gaze to meet his.
You really think I'm using you for sex?
No, she said softly, staring into his beautiful brown eyes. The feeling of his hand touching her face and his closeness had her anger melting. Then, as Luis's office door creaked open in the distance, Javier put his hands from her chin.
Sonny, what are you doing here so late?
Luis asked, heading their way. I was just about to go, she announced.
Let me call you a car.
Javier said, standing up. I can catch the train.
Javier, let's get this meeting over with.
Luis said, nodding toward the door and tearing the two away from each other.
Sonny, you'll lock up after you're done, right?
Luis asked. She gave him a nod, then watched them walk out the door. Later that night, while Sonia lay in bed, she was surprised and delighted to get a text message from Javier. It was a simple text, telling Sonia that he missed her and wasn't looking forward to going back to the brownstone and her not being there. She called him immediately with a wide grin. Where you at? She asked, hearing a bunch of noise in the background.
I just stepped out of a restaurant. Me and Luis at a meeting.
You still at that meeting? I figured you'd be done. It's so late, she commented. Changing the subject, Javier asked.
You want to come over to my house tomorrow night?
I'm going to the library after work, and it's probably going to be a late night.
You were already pulling late nights at the library, and classes just started up yesterday.
Now Sonia was the one changing the subject, as she let out a nervous chuckle and quickly said, Yeah, but I can come after I'm done, if you don't mind me coming over late.
No, I don't mind. I want to see you.
I'll see you tomorrow night, then. She smiled. The next day after work, Sonia was racing across campus, hurrying over to the library to meet up with Nate. She stepped into the hushed main area, then headed back to the small windowless study room. Sorry I'm late, she said, sitting across from him.
Don't worry about it.
As Sonia put her purse from her shoulder, Nate slid a photograph across the worn wooden tabletop. She was so excited when Nate called, explaining that he found footage of the potential shooters. But even with a harsh fluorescent light illuminating the printout, Sonia couldn't make out a thing. The picture is too dark, and the faces are way too blurry. Sonia sighed, looking down at the 3 dark blobs in the photo, struggling to decipher the pixelated shapes.
I know. This is the only decent frame I could pull. But the important thing is, they really are 3 people.
Sonia nodded. So that lady who said she saw 3 men was right. Nate nodded, then added,
And you being shot by a 20 cal and your father being shot by a 9 suggests 2 shooters.
So my ex was definitely lying to me. There was no random man who shot us. He made it all up, she said with anger, just as her phone buzzed with a call from Javier. Sonia excused herself, then stepped out of the study room, the door clicking softly behind her. She opened her phone, slipping behind a tall shelf of books in the back of the almost empty library.
You still coming over?
Javier asked. Yeah, but I just got here, so I won't be leaving anytime soon.
All right. I just wanted to know when it's in a car to get you. Just text me when you're almost done.
Sonia smiled at his thoughtfulness, then thanked him in a hushed tone. A couple of hours later, Sonia and Nate called it a night. They left the warm library and stepped out into the cool, dark campus. At that hour, the yard was almost empty, just a handful of people lingering outside. Once they stepped out onto the sidewalk, where the city sounds were louder outside the campus, Nate said,
It's too late for you to catch the train by yourself. We can split a cab.
I'm not going up to the Bronx. I'm headed to Brooklyn, she said, gesturing toward an awaiting town car. Nate's eyes moved over to the uniformed driver, holding a sign with Sonia's name on it. He gave her a leery nod, then, in a tone laced with concern, he told her to be safe. The moment Javier opened the door to the brownstone, Sonia was enveloped in the rich scent of roses. She stepped inside, stopping short as a surprised smile spread across her face. Her eyes moved over to the living room, staring at countless long-stemmed red roses sitting in tall glass vases. Then her gaze met Javier's, and before she could thank him, his hands were on her waist, pulling her in for a deep kiss. Sonia dropped her overnight bag to the floor, then looped her arms over his broad shoulders. His hands immediately cupped the backs of her thighs as he lifted her up with ease. Sonia's legs were wrapped around his waist, and her body was pressed against him. The now familiar closeness reigniting that spark between them. This night began what would become their usual routine. That month, Javier sent a card to the office or to Sonia's house every night, whisking her to his place until he had basically moved her in without the two even discussing it. The day he finally made the move-in official by giving her a key, Sonia was half asleep, caught between dreams and reality. He nudged her awake around 3 a.m, standing over her like a creepy shadow, murmuring her name. She looked up at him with heavy, sleepy eyes. Without her contacts in, all she saw was a blurry-faced man, dressed head to toe in black, looming over her. Javier repeated her name, stepping closer, his face finally coming into focus. "Is it time to get up?" she asked in sleepy confusion.
Nah, I need to go to work early. I just wanted to give you a key,
he said, sliding a copper-colored key onto the nightstand beside her. Then he told her to lock the door when she left for class. The early morning air in Manhattan was sharp and crisp, but even that high up in the air, Javier could still smell the exhaust from taxis and buses below. He was perched high on the rooftop of a parking garage between the quiet avenues of Lexington and 3rd. He was just a dark silhouette against the faint glow of the city lights. His rifle, fitted with a scope, was aimed at the entrance of an Upper East Side townhouse. Javier triple-checked the address, written on a crumpled photo beside him. His patience was a practiced thing. He'd been there for an hour, lying completely still, with his eyes focused on that door. As Javier waited for his mark to leave the house for work, he wondered what kind of job this man could have that required him to leave the house before the sun was even up. As the bald white man with thick glasses finally stepped out of the door, Javier's finger lightly stroked the trigger. He lined up his rifle and was about to take his shot when a lady holding a baby stepped out. The tired-looking woman with frizzy red hair was talking to the man as the toddler squirmed in her arms. Javier eased his finger off the trigger, gut twisting, just like it did when he stood in Mildred's living room, listening to her speak about Gary. Javier sighed as the woman said a few last words, then headed back into the house. Javier realigned his aim, then took his shot. When Sonia returned to the brownstone that night, Javier was already in bed. After he hadn't shown up to work, she texted him, asking where he was, and he replied simply saying he didn't feel good. Sonia climbs into bed, placing the bag of shrimp Alfredo onto Javier's lap. "I went to Constantine's and got your favorite," she announced, plus a slice of tiramisu. Javier thanked her and gave her a soft kiss. "You feeling any better?"
Here, just needed some sleep.
He nodded, reaching over and stroking her neck. Then he said, in a sincere tone,
I'm glad you're here.
Me too. She smiled. How was work this morning? You left so early.
It was fine. Everything went real well.
Sonia and Javier hardly ever fought, but when they did, it was always about the same thing. A one-sided argument, with Sonia complaining about them never leaving the brownstone. With his sane, solid expression, and Javier listening, he usually just let her blow off the steam, saying whatever was on her mind. Then they would go back to normal when she saw things his way and realized the setup was for the best. She usually get over it within a few hours, but when this particular Saturday, Sonia wasn't budging. She had been moving around the brownstone, ignoring Javier and in one of her moods. Even after he ordered her favorite takeout, she had chosen to eat in the kitchen alone, avoiding their usual spot in the living room, comfy on the couch. He stepped up behind her, running his hands down her sides, his lips hitting the spot on her neck just below her ear that always softened her up. Javier, can you please stop? She said in a cold tone.
You want to go to the movies that bad?
It's not about the movies. It's about us having a real relationship.
This ain't real?
He asked, offended. You know what I mean. We've been together for 2 months, and we haven't been on one date. She shot him a look. Javier let her aside, then gave her a nod.
I was planning a trip for us after you finish your classes in a couple of weeks. But since you this upset, maybe we can go somewhere before the summer.
She smiled. Where?
I was thinking Martha's Vineyard. Heard it was nice out there. Maybe we can go somewhere closer, just for the weekend.
Sonia swiveled around, then hopped up from the stool, wrapping Javier in a tight hug. The next day, they found themselves in some small town in Jersey called Cape May. Javier stared over at Sonia, who was beaming ever since they left their bed and breakfast. His fingers stroking her hip through the thin fabric of her dress as they walked along the boardwalk. Those weekend trips soon became the compromise. They drive out to some random small town, as far up as Maine and as far south as Maryland, exploring cities that neither of them had ever heard of, finding any place that was far enough for the two to feel free, where they could pretend that they were a normal couple, doing all the things they couldn't back in New York. Simple things like walking hands in hand through the mall or sitting close to each other in the booth at some restaurant. Javier loved the trips because they made Sonia so happy. It was like he could see the excitement radiating off of her, and they seemed to give her so much life. A few weeks later, Sonia was in the back of a town car, riding through the Bronx. She rolled down her window, letting the warm evening breeze blow across her face as she moved through those familiar streets. Even though the sun was setting, painting the sky soft hues of pink and orange, the weather was still warm, a reminder that summer was only a few weeks away. After the town car parked outside of her house, Sonia drove up the stoop, running inside to make a quick pit stop for clothes before another weekend getaway with Javier. Inside the house were the familiar sounds of home, the faint murmur of the TV, and Gloria's voice coming from the living room. Hey, Ma. Sonia's voice echoed down the hallway as she hurried into her room.
Sonny, come here.
Gloria replied. Following the sounds of chatting and laughter, Sonia found Anna and her Aunt Pam in the living room. Before she could even say hello, Gloria grinned and said all excited.
Your cousin's getting married.
Emma stood up, rushing over to Sonia and jamming her newly ringed finger into her face. Sonia smiled wide, grabbed Anna's hand, and taking in the unbelievable news. Then she dragged Anna up the hall, asking for the details as Sonia quickly packed her bag. Anna flopped down on Sonia's bed, cheesing hard, as she recounted the proposal.
I was so surprised. He took me on one of those ferry tours that ride around the city at night. We ate dinner, then he just got down on one knee, and bam.
Anna stared at her ring adoringly. I can't believe it, Sonia smiled, looking back at Anna. And your parents are okay with it?
They're past okay. I think they're more excited than I am. Probably just want to get me out of the house at this point. Because my mother is already planning the wedding, and I just gave her the news yesterday. I told her me and Frederick are gonna do a long engagement. We'll probably wait a year or two.
I've never seen you so happy. Sonia stood, grinning right along with Anna. You know you can hit me up if you need some help with the planning.
Oh, I will. And your mother already volunteered your services. What have you been up to, though? I called you last night to tell you the news. You didn't even answer.
Sorry, I was busy. You should have texted me.
I couldn't tell you something like that over a text.
Anna commented, noticing Sonia quickly packing.
You about to leave out again?
Yeah, I gotta head back out.
Where you going?
On a weekend trip, Sonia said casually.
A trip where?
I'm not sure yet.
You going with some people from school?
Nah, somebody from work. Sonia smiled. Anna looked over at her suspiciously.
Who from work?
Sonia's smile faded. I can't really say.
What you mean you can't say? It's some kind of secret?
Yeah, something like that. Sonia said in a hushed tone, closing her bedroom door.
Sonny, you know you could tell me who it is, and I'll keep it to myself.
Anna pushed in a begging tone. Sonia looked over at her cousin, wanting to share the news, but shook her head, saying, I can't. Anna rolled her eyes.
Well, at least tell me why y'all have to keep it a secret.
Sonia shook her head again. Then Anna nodded slowly.
That's okay, because I think I already figured it out. And if it is who I think it is, you'll only be wasting your time.
Anna shot her a look of disapproval, and Sonia rolled her eyes with a sigh.
If he's cheating on his wife, what makes you think he'll be faithful to you?
Then Sonia's face balled up in confusion. Anna, what are you talking about?
You spend so much time at work and out in the Hampton with those people. You're sleeping with your boss, that politician, right?
Anna whispered. No, Sonia said with a twisted up face. Then she let out a laugh. I'm not having an affair with Louise.
Well, who is your little mystery boyfriend?
I already told you I can't say.
I told you about Frederick when our relationship was a secret.
Sonia sighed, then Anna quickly added.
I promise, I won't say anything.
Sonia smiled slightly. Then she said, with quiet excitement, It's Javier. Anna rolled her eyes with a chuckle, saying,
You're doing all this and it's just Javier.
He's Rico's friend.
Yeah, but Rico's not even in the country.
He's trying to come back. And Javier made a good point. Rico still knows a lot of people around here, and if word got back to him, he could be a problem for me. Now Anna looked concerned.
Well, if Rico finding out is that serious, maybe the two of you shouldn't even risk her.
Sonia lowered her eyes to the floor. I like Javier so much, though. Anna smiled a little.
You know, I kind of figured that he liked you a long time ago. Back when he came over on your birthday.
Sonia shook her head with a wide smile. I don't think he was into me back then.
I think so. He was acting like he didn't want to leave that night, and I could just tell.
Sonia blushed slightly at the thought, wondering if Anna was right. Then, as her thoughts drifted back to Javier, she realized he was out in Brooklyn at that very moment, waiting for her. Look, Anna, I need to head out, but I promise, I'm gonna call you tomorrow, Sonia said, then doubled back, giving her cousin a quick hug. And congratulations. As Sonia settled into the plush back seat of the town car, her fingers flew across the keypad, sending a quick text to Javier, letting him know she was on her way. Just as the message sent, her phone buzzed with an incoming call from Nate.
I just spoke to Rashad's daughter. She agreed to meet with me on Monday. I'm gonna ask what her father was looking into that got his business trashed. You think you can come? She might open up more with you there. Your father's being friends and all.
Yeah, but I'm not sure to help. I don't really know her or like that. She babysat me a couple of times, but that was it.
I think it'll help if you're there.
I'll be there, Sonia assured him. When her town car pulled up to the brownstone, Javier was sitting in his Audi, waiting. She climbed out of one car, then dragged her back into the other. Sorry I'm so late, she sighed as Javier pulled off.
Don't worry about it.
He said, noting her exasperated expression. Then he asked if she was good. Yeah, I'm just tired. Going from school to work, then home, and now we'll be on the road for hours. She shook her head.
We could always stay in the house. I take you on these trips because you hate being in the brownstone.
Sonia laughed. I don't hate being in the brownstone. I just like to leave sometimes, what you never like to do.
We got everything we need in the house,
He said with a shrug. Well, maybe next weekend we can just stay home. I got finals coming up anyway, so I need to sit still and focus.
or wanted to visit your granny next weekend. Check on that work I had done.
He announced. Right. I did want to go see her, Sonia said with a tired smile. We'll only be staying for a few hours though, right? He nodded.
Yeah, I just want to check out the work.
Sonia smiled over at Javier as he drove them out of Brooklyn. He always seemed to surprise her with how sweet and thoughtful he could be. For so long, she thought the absolute worst about him. But now she realized just how wrong she was. A few days later, on Monday night, Sonia and Javier were eating a late dinner on the couch as some boring TV show played in the background. As they ate, and Javier stared at the TV, Sonia was staring over at Javier. Javier, Sonia said, breaking the silence.
What's up?
I want to get married one day. Javier turned from the TV, looking over at her. Then he said simply,
Me too.
You want to get married to me? She asked with a shaky voice, like she was afraid of the answer. He hugged her at the waist.
Why would you ask me that?
Because a secret relationship can't go on forever. And we definitely can't get married if you don't even want to tell anybody about us.
Sonny, I'm not going anywhere.
He assured her, holding her tight. So me and you are gonna live happily ever after? She asked with doubt.
Yeah, we are.
He said confidently. She lowered her eyes as he began to kiss her neck. Then he asked,
How many babies you want to have?
4, 2 boys and 2 girls.
Nah, let's make that 8.
You want to have 8 kids?
Yup, we gonna have 8 kids, right?
He asked, staring into her eyes. She nodded, beginning to laugh. Just then the text came through, and her phone started vibrating on the coffee table. She flipped it open, reading the text from Nate. He was informing her that he was running late and that he would be arriving in 10 minutes. Sonia hopped up, setting her plate on the coffee table.
Where you going?
Javier asked. I told her no friend I'd stop at her house tonight. He gave her a nod, then told her he'd call her a car. When Sonia pulled up to Ariana's apartment in the Bronx, Nate was already there. A dark silhouette on the sidewalk, dressed in a black hoodie. Sorry I'm so late, Sonia said, jogging over to him.
Don't worry about it. I already told her we'd be late.
The elevator hummed its way to the 7th floor, and when the doors opened, Ariana stood in the doorway of her apartment, a warm chuckle escaping her lips. She read her eyes over Sonia's white silk blouse and sleek black pants.
Look at little Sonny, all grown up,
She said, her smile widening before surprising Sonia with a welcoming hug.
I guess you really are grown, though. You and Brianna are the same age, right?
Yeah, Sonia smiled as they stepped into the apartment. After Sonia and Nate sat on the sofa, Ariana flopped on the armchair and asked with a light sigh.
So, what y'all want to talk about?
We're trying to figure out who would have did that damage to your father's business, Sonia explained. Then Nate hadn't.
We think the person who did the damage could have been behind the shooting.
I have no idea who smashed out my father's windows. I told him it was probably just some kids from the neighborhood being bad. But he was all paranoid and thought it had something to do with my sister.
What would any of that have to do with Bree?
Brianna was running away a lot back then and getting into all kinds of trouble. She disappeared for a few months. My father swore somebody kidnapped her.
Ariana rolled her eyes. Was she kidnapped?
No. Brianna thought she was grown. Started running with some girls who was doing that sugar baby thing.
What's that?
Prostitution.
Nate responded.
Thank you.
Ariana sighed.
I tried telling Brianna that, but she swore up and down that having a bunch of sugar daddies was like having a couple of boyfriends. I tried telling her that it wasn't, that she was literally selling her body to strangers for pocket change, putting her life at risk. I told my father that she wasn't kidnapped and that she just ran off. But I didn't want to snitch and give him the details of what she was really doing. He didn't believe me, though. He was convinced that her disappearance was somehow connected to all those other girls who was going missing in the Bronx back then. He went up to the precinct, acting all crazy, and accusing the cops of not investigating Brianna's disappearance because she was black.
Then Sonia said, I mean, he wasn't wrong, though, because if the cops did take Brianna's disappearance seriously, they probably would have found out that she was doing the sugar baby thing and wasn't kidnapped.
But my father was making it seem like the cops was going past not investigating. He told them that he knew they was covering up the missing girls' cases.
She shook her head, clearly still thinking that her father had gone nuts.
He said that to the cops' faces?
Yep. He told them he was investigating the whole precinct. Said he was going to reveal the truth soon. I was actually getting worried about him. He sounded so insane.
Do you know anything about this investigation?
No, he never shared any of that with me. Made it seem like the less I knew, the better. Those cops weren't covering up anything, though. Like I said, my father was just acting real paranoid.
Where's Brianna now? Are you sure she's okay?
Brianna's upstate in Albany, but no, she's not okay. She came back to New York a couple months ago because she got real sick out in California.
Ariana lowered her eyes.
She moved up there to stay with my mother's sister, who used to be a nurse.
So your father died thinking your sister was kidnapped?
No. Eventually I told him. I pulled up her page on some website promoting her services just to get him to believe me.
She shuddered at the memory.
I was hoping that showing him the truth would finally get him to stop acting so crazy. But nothing changed with him.
So he kept investigating the missing girl cases anyway.
Ariana nodded, but Sonia asked, Do you know what happened to his research? Maybe we can take a look at it, see if it's up in here.
Yeah. His landlord boxed up on said stuff after the shooting. It's in my back closet. You can borrow it if you want.
She said with an indifferent shrug. Moments later, Sonia and Nate left the apartment with a heavy box of paperwork. As they rode the elevator downstairs, Sonia asked, "You really think those missing girl cases can have something to do with the shooting?"
Could be. Some of those cases the cops fumbled were missing child cases. A bunch of black and brown girls missing, and nobody but their family seemed to care.
He said, getting a better grip of the huge box in his arms.
I'm gonna look through this stuff at Tony's house sometime next week. You're welcome to come if you like.
Who is Tony?
The guy you wanted to work your father's case instead of me.
He said with a slight smile. You remember that?
Yeah, I remember you doubting me. Worried I couldn't solve the case.
Sorry, she laughed.
Maybe you had a reason to worry. It's almost 2 years later, and the case is still unsolved.
But that's because it's so complicated, right? A lot bigger than either of us realized. He nodded as they stepped off the elevator. I'll be there. Just text me Tony's address, she said, opening the front door for him. But why are we going to be working out of Tony's house all the way in Queens, instead of down in Chinatown?
The office is closed for now. We're conducting our investigations out of Tony's place and meeting with clients at coffee shops until we can get another location.
Why is the office closed?
Low funds. Been focusing as much time as we can on this police cover-up.
Sorry, I haven't been paying you for the case, and you've been spending so much time working on it.
Don't worry. I didn't ask for a payment because I chose to keep this case open, and I wanted to find a better location anyway.
I still want to pay you something.
Save your money. You're a college student now. Put that toward tuition. Besides, we got a lot of new cases coming in.
He assured her, then glanced over to her town car.
I'll see you next week.
He gave her a nod. Thank you, she said, climbing into the car. Later that night, Sonia sat straddling Javier's waist as she gave him a back rub. Her hands pressed into his tense muscles, kneaded and gripping with tight firmness, while her mind drifted off. She was wondering if Rashad had actually been murdered because he discovered some cover-up of missing girls in the Bronx. As her mind wandered, Sonia's nails must have dug too deep into Javier's back because he jumped a little, bringing Sonia back to reality. Sorry, she said, rubbing his flesh. He turned, straining to look at her, then asked if she was okay. She gave him a weak nod. Then Javier turned over, moving Sonia onto the bed beside him.
You know you can talk to me about anything, right?
Yeah, I know, she said, lying on his chest. She wanted to talk to him about it, tell him everything that was going on. But she promised herself she'd be more careful this time. There wouldn't be any repeats of jealous boyfriends derailing the investigation and keeping her from the truth about her father's murder. So you made her tone light and sweet, as she said, Jasmine and a bunch of other kids from school are going on a trip to Paris later this year.
Do you want to go?
I'm thinking about it. Then she smiled, adding, I want you to come too. Javier shook his head.
I know you don't want to go all the way to Paris just to stay locked up in a hotel room with me.
We wouldn't stay in a hotel. We can go to some restaurants, some museums. He stared at her blankly. Then she said in a pleading tone, We'll be in another country, and none of those kids know you or Rico.
What about Jasmine?
She already knows about us. He sighed, staring over at her.
I told you not to tell anybody.
She's not even from New York.
People talk,
he said roughly. The hardness of his tone had her pulling away and crossing her arms over her chest.
Is Jasmine the only person who knows?
No,
What did you kill?
Just Anna. Then she added, my mother knows too. Javier was silent, staring hard at her. I didn't even tell my mother though. She just faded out. I mean, she's not dumb. I'm over here every night. She knows we're not just friends. And I only told my cousin because she thought I was having an affair with your uncle. Javier shot her a confused look. She knew I was sneaking her on with somebody, and because I'm always at work, she assumed it was Louise. Preaching to me about sleeping with a married man. He shook his head. Javier, don't you think you went way past careful?
Sonny, I told you from the start what this was, and you agreed.
I only agree because I figured eventually you would change your mind about keeping us a secret.
Sonny, you don't know what Rico is capable of. I'm not about to let nothing happen to you.
He pulled her close, then said in a gentle tone,
We can go to Paris if you want, but just you and me.
Later that week, Sonia and Javier drove out to visit Mildred and Hempstead, and what was supposed to be a short visit turned into an all-day trip. As the sun started to set, Javier stepped outside onto the porch. The murmur of conversation floating out of the screen door, along with the clatter of dishes in Mildred's kitchen. He inspected the newly replaced railings and steps, just as the streetlights flickered on one by one, and their orange-tinged glow illuminated the modest houses and their small patches of lawn. That's when Javier's eyes landed on Mildred's small front yard. It was filled with crabgrass and dandelions, so he added landscapers to his mental list for the next round of improvements. Sonia stepped out onto the porch, standing near the steps, and like instinct, he reached out his long arm, pulling her up against him.
Sorry we stayed out here for so long. I know you need to get home. Study for your finals.
I should be good, she assured him with a nod. She wrapped her arms over his shoulders, gazing up into his eyes. Javier, I appreciate everything you've been doing lately.
I'm happy I can help your grandmother.
Not just the stuff with the house, but everything you've been doing for me. Appreciate it all. He kissed her softly. Then, when they pulled apart, Sonia noticed that familiar far-off look in his eyes. The look he seemed to get out of nowhere, whenever things seemed so good between them. He stroked the side of her neck and informs her in a casual tone.
I'm going to fly out to visit Rico next week. He asked me to come down.
She gave him a silent nod and quickly changed the subject. I'll be done with finals this week. Did you still want to go to Martha's Vineyard? He smiled a little.
Yeah, we can do that.
After that trip, we can spend the summer staying in the brownstone. I know you're probably tired of traveling so much.
I don't mind.
She stared up at him, thinking about how much things had changed in just a few months. She'd gone from nervous first kisses to feeling at home in Javier's arms, this familiar embrace making her feel complete. Sonia studied his expression, noticing that again he looked more serious than usual, like something was heavy on his mind. You all right? He nodded, then looking straight into her eyes, his voice dropped low, turning even more serious, as he said,
I love you.
The intensity in his eyes and the heaviness of those 3 words brought an unexpected sensation to Sonia. I love you too, she replied, her voice matching his seriousness. They held each other as a silent understanding passed between them that this was different. Not the surface level stuff most people call love. This was something real, something deep, and they both knew it. Sonia wrapped her arms tight around him, holding him closer than she ever hugged anybody before, clinging to him like some unseen force was threatening to pull them apart. After months of not visiting Rico, Javier finally flew down to Colombia. He sat at the kitchen counter, eating a plate of pasta prepared by the chef and speaking to Rico's new girl. Rico steps into the kitchen, wrapping up his phone call. He walked over to them, wrapping his arm around the girl.
What y'all talking about me here? Speaking that Spanish. You trying to seek my girl?
Rico joked.
You've been down here for 2 years and still don't speak Spanish?
I don't need to learn that. I'll be home soon.
Rico said with a nod. Then he asked,
What's up with Sonny?
Javier's eyes moved over to the girl.
You want to talk about this in front of her?
Yeah, she don't know English.
Javier went on.
Nothing changed.
Javier said simply.
She's still just working for my uncle and going to school.
So you haven't seen her with no other dudes?
No.
Rico nodded, then staring off at nothing in particular. He said,
I'm going to fix everything with her when I get back. I know once I'm in the city, I have to make everything right.
You spending all this money and time trying to get back to her, but she won't even talk to you.
Javier said, shaking his head.
All your family is down here. Why don't you just stay?
I told you Sonny is mad right now. Go find something back in New York. I'll make things right, and we'll be back together.
Javier shot him a look, but Rico was too busy staring off into space to catch Javier's heart stare.
You and Twin never did understand. What I had with Sonny was so different than anything I ever had before or since. Like, the feelings we have for each other ran deep. We had something real. That's how I know she can't just throw everything away. We had a couple of misunderstandings, but I'm gonna make everything right.
He swore confidently. After touching down, Javier drove for LaGuardia, adrenaline pumping through his veins, as his mind buzzed with the anticipation of reuniting with Sonia. She was slightly annoyed when he told her he was flying down to Colombia. Now he was going to surprise her with the news that he was back in town early. But as he drove through Queens, he spotted Sonia climbing out of the back seat of a cab with some man. Javier slowly put his car into the gas station, watching them walk over to a house. Javier called Sonia, and at first he didn't think she would answer. She had paused on the steps, staring down at the phone as it rang, like she actually was thinking of ignoring him. Then, after the man stepped into the house, she finally pressed accept. Hey, Harv, where you at?
I'm back in the city. Why you ask?
Because you told me you would be able to use your phone in Colombia, remember? Then she asked with concern, is everything all right? You seem upset.
Everything is good. I flew back early since I wanted to see you. You at the house.
I want to see you too. But no, I'm out right now. I'll try not to get home too late though.
No rush.
He said flatly, watching as she stepped into the house.